on State Radio with our guest, Butch Witkowski. Enjoy.
Support for this podcast and the following message come from E-Verify, dedicated to providing employment eligibility verification for the needs of businesses and the employees that help them thrive. Let's go higher. everify.gov/go.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Janine Herbst. Federal emergency management workers are inspecting possible sites today to house tens of thousands of people displaced by the wildfire. Mark Albert of North State Public Radio reports reconstruction is likely to take years.
Though community generosity remains high and some evacuees joke that they're gaining weight, federal, state, and local officials are looking at longer-term solutions. Ed Mayer, executive director of the Butte County Housing Authority, told NPR FEMA was looking for sites to build 2,000 housing units in 200-unit villages. What type of housing remains unclear. Chico City Manager Mark Orms said the scale of the fire's destruction is beyond scenarios FEMA planned for.
After they assess the properties, they'll be able to give us an idea of what their ideas are in relation to the type of housing.
He said it may be trailers or something else, presumably prefabricated structures. For NPR News, I'm Mark Albert in Chico, California.
Meanwhile, 76 people died in the Camp Fire in Butte County in Northern California, and more than 1,300 are listed as missing. In Florida's extremely tight race for U.S. Senate, Democratic incumbent Bill Nelson today called Republican Governor Rick Scott conceding defeat.
We have to move beyond a politics that aims not just to defeat, but to destroy, where truth is treated as disposable, where falsehoods abound, and that the free press is assaulted as the enemy of the people.
The final results show Scott defeated Nelson by just over 10,000 votes out of 8 million cast. This comes a day after Democrat Andrew Gillum conceded the governor's race to Republican Ron DeSantis after a recount in that race. The U.S. Special Envoy to Afghanistan says he is cautiously optimistic about peace prospects, but he says he doesn't want to raise false expectations. Jennifer Glass reports from Kabul that this comes as the Taliban continue to wage regular deadly attacks across the country.
Zalmay Khalilzad has just been in Qatar and Abu Dhabi, meeting with Taliban and regional representatives to facilitate an Afghan peace process. It's his second visit to the region in as many months. Speaking here in Kabul, he said any final deal is up to the Afghans.
The Taliban are saying that they do not believe that they can succeed militarily, that they would like to see the problems that remain resolved by peaceful means, by political negotiations.
Both the Taliban and the Afghan government are putting together negotiation teams. Khalilzad says he hopes they will use the upcoming April 20th presidential election date as a deadline and come up with a peace agreement before then. For NPR News, I'm Jennifer Glass in Kabul.
U.S. futures contracts are trading in mixed territory at this hour. You're listening to NPR News from Washington. The next class of American Rhodes Scholars has been named. And as NPR's Laurel Walmsley reports, this latest group includes the largest number of women ever.
Out of 32 winners in the newest class of Rhodes Scholars, 21 are women, the most ever in a single class. And nearly half of the scholars are immigrants or first-generation Americans. The scholarships pay for 2 or 3 years of study at Oxford University in England, and they're among the most prestigious academic awards for American college graduates. The first class of scholars entered Oxford in 1904, but women couldn't apply until 1976. This was the first year that students who were covered by DACA were eligible for the scholarship. One DACA recipient, currently a senior at Harvard, was among the winners. A total of 100 Rhodes Scholars from around the world will be named this year. Notable past recipients include President Bill Clinton, TV host Rachel Maddow, journalist Ronan Farrow, and Senator Cory Booker. Laurel Walmsley, NPR News.
BlackBerry is buying Cylance, a U.S.-based artificial intelligence and cybersecurity company, for $1.4 billion. It's the biggest acquisition in the Canadian tech firm's history. BlackBerry has wanted to buy the California-based company because of its pioneering work on AI, algorithmic science, and its cybersecurity software. The deal also helps solidify BlackBerry's continuing move away from the smartphone market to focus on software and also security, including the automotive sector. This deal is expected to close in February, but that is pending regulatory approvals. I'm Janine Herbst, and you're listening to NPR News from Washington.
Welcome back to WBHM Digital Broadcasting out of Birmingham, Alabama. You're listening to Fate Radio, and I am your host, Kat Hobson. I am having a fantastic time enjoying my discussion with our guest, Butch Witkowski. I hope you're enjoying it too. Butch is a ufologist, a cryptozoologist. He is dabbled in the paranormal, not to a great extent, but getting there. We're getting him there. And he is somebody that I have learned so much from in the past 4 years. It's just astounding. So, Butch, welcome back.
Thank you. It's always good to be on this show because some shows are scripted. I do a lot of shows, and some of them are really scripted where, they tell you ahead of time, submit questions, and,
yes.
We'll ask you those questions. I really don't care much for that. I find that just carrying on the conversation, it usually garners a lot more questions from the audience than if you were given those standard questions like, do you believe in UFOs? Do you think Roswell really happened? Personally, no.
Right. Well,
and you said you have a couple questions from the audience.
I do have a couple of questions from the audience, and we're going to start over on the Spreaker side of chat. That's one thing about doing the show the way I do. I have our WBHM-DB.com website with the Rumble Talk chat there that has questions, and I have the Spreaker chat, which also has questions. So it's kind of neat. If people are mobile, they can listen in on Spreaker, and they have their own chat room. So it works out really well. And technically, Bobby said he had a question, and it turned into two, which is always fun for me. The first
Works
one,
for me.
Well, you're going to love this one. I have my own opinion. I'm curious to see what you say. What does Butch know about the supposed disclosure that's happening next year?
Well, the disclosure happened a long time ago.
Right.
And I'll tell you when disclosure happened exactly. It happened during Project Blue Book. When they ended Project Blue Book in 1969, they had 1,570 cases that were unsolved, unknown, and classified as unknown flying objects. Mm-hmm. There's your disclosure. So somebody coming up now and saying, well, we have footage of from a camera gunship, of a UFO doing this and doing that and doing this. Listen, I could do that in Photoshop in 15 minutes. And when they put it out the first time, a lot of savvy researchers picked up on it right away. They said, well, this is the gun sight camera from an F-8 Hornet or an F-15 Hornet or something like that. And it turned out that it was not the heads-up display of that type of aircraft. It was an F-15 Strike Eagle. So if they don't know the difference between those two aircraft, how do I know that thing that they're looking through the gun sight is actually there? So that was another one. And the fact that the government has had a UFO community, so to speak, with a group of really sharp investigators out there ready to pounce on giving disclosure. I mean, disclosure has been coming about now, I'm going to say, it really got cranking in 2006, 7, and 8, where they were having disclosure conferences all over the place. And everyone said the same thing. You went to the conference, you paid the big bucks, you stayed in the fancy hotel, you ate the fancy, prancy, expensive meals, so you drove 200 or 300 miles to get there, back and forth, everything out of your own pocket, and then you get there and the guy stands up and says, our disclosure is going to be next year.
There you go.
And then the following year, they have another conference. The same guy gets up and says, disclosure will happen next year. Now, fool me once. You're not going to fool me twice.
We were actually discussing a situation somewhat similar to that before the show. Yeah. And, Bobby actually says, no, he means to the worldwide disclosure, not just the U.S. government deciding that they're going to, baby spoon feed people.
Yeah, but France has put out all their files. Kamada's put out all their files. Canadians put out all their files. Belgium put out all their files. England put out all their files. I mean, all the major countries that were tracking and going after UFOs have put out their files. They're all available on the internet. Anybody can go up on those sites and read them. I mean, the Kamada files from France, they're very extensive. Belgian are very extensive. I mean, they are what they are. Those are reports that, you know, are from the militaries and the different investigative groups from those countries. So it has been going out to the world. In the United States, it was actually done in 1969 with the end of Project Blue Book when they said they had 1,570-some cases that were never solved. I mean, they didn't know what they were, so they were classified as UFOs. One of them, one of the famous ones, Presque Isle, was right here in Pennsylvania, where the Air Force showed up and the whole 9 yards. It's still there. On our website, we even give you the number of the report. So people can go on the website, pull that number up, and they can read the whole report. But that's listed as an unknown flying object. So that's disclosure. Now, I don't know what they, you know, when some of these people talk about disclosure, unless they're going to show you a craft and the persons or things that were piloting it, they've already done that. So if you want to spend $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 and go to a conference somewhere to have somebody tell you that disclosure is going to be next year, and then when you get back there next year, they're going to tell you next year. So I mean, as long as they can keep you coming and spending money, it's a happy deal.
There you go. Well, I just was told that I'm not getting his question. He means like meet and greet, like they will be among us, like we'll be interacting.
I think. My personal opinion is, look, they've been here for thousands of years. Thousands of years. I mean, if you look at stuff back in ancient times, right. I mean, there are things that have been done from stonework to drawings to carvings, stuff
to machining.
Couldn't be done back then.
Yes, it has to be machining and CNC machining, not just manual machining.
Exactly. So to say that people say, well, I don't know if they're walking amongst us. Well, somebody did that back then. I mean, silly stuff like moving stones hundreds of miles. There ain't no way. I mean, how do you Machu Picchu up in Argentina?
Yes.
How did they get those stones that weigh 20 and 30 tons up the top of that mountain? And there are hundreds of them. Hundreds. There's no path. They're sheer cliffs. How did they get them up there? I mean, there's so many simple things to ask. Machu Picchu, the carvings. Who did those carvings? They're so sharp and so close that if you run your thumb along them, you'll cut your finger. Mm-hmm. They didn't even have those type of tools back then. I mean, we're talking about granite. I mean, not too long ago, and I don't know if it was on Ancient Aliens or one of those shows where a guy who is a stonemason and does all his designing and stonework and special stonework with only granite, right? And they asked him to copy a couple things, which they took the drawings and measurements and all that stuff and gave it to him to make in his facility, where he has CRC machines, CNC machines, he has rock cutters, he has all kind of specialized tools, and he made what he wanted to make, and it didn't even fit. He couldn't get down to those tolerances.
Oh, wow.
So
I will have to tell my husband that. We own a machining business.
So how do these people who are running around in loincloths with no underwear on most of their life, going out and beating to death their lunch every day, growing nothing on top of a mountain to eat, they had to hunt everything, all of a sudden become, Class A machinists with granite? I mean, that's nuts. I mean, that doesn't even make sense. So I think, somebody said something one time, and I thought about it many times over all these years, 30 years of doing this. Somebody said, They are us.